Welcome to lesson 106 of Hunger and Thirst for Righteousness. It's called the Temple. And so, today we're going to start in Second Chronicles. We won't be in Second Chronicles very long. We're going to start kind of this transition into how the rest of the classes will go. And like I mentioned in the last lesson, we'll be looking at the Bible less from a micro lens and more of a macro lens. So we're going to look at more of the bigger picture rather than the small details. I think that we've not that I think, but God has really shown me that we have done our due diligence with the details and extracting the small lessons from every story and the small revelations. And it's time to get into the bigger picture of things. So, the temple. Let's go ahead and get into it. And so, 2 Chronicles 8:1-2, it says, "Now it came about the end of the 20 years in which Solomon had built the house of the Lord and his own house, that he built the cities which Hiram had given to him, and settled the sons of Israel there." So, what is my point for sharing this with you? We were talking about how Solomon built the house of the Lord. So Solomon builds the temple. Okay, the temple is something that becomes a very big deal, and it is a big deal. In truth, it is a big deal. Okay, it is a big deal what Solomon did. So Solomon builds the house of the Lord, and we know that God does not dwell in houses made with hands. It says that even heaven and earth cannot contain him. And so we will get into some things about this temple and it's the spiritual revelation behind it. There's a lot of great things to learn about it. So first we'll start here. Why Solomon? Why Solomon? Out of all those people in the Bible that were great in, the groups of the Levites, and there was David and, all the people in the Bible, why was it there was Solomon that was chosen to build this house? And like I said, we're looking at this from a bigger perspective. I've already went through the scriptures that we have the Lord telling David that his son will be the one to build his house, and David wanted to build it, but it wasn't for him to do. Okay, and we also talk about how a lot of that prophecy was also about pointing to Jesus, but there also is, like we talk about in anagogical interpretation, there's truth of it physically and spiritually. So yes, it actually was his physical son, but also it was a pointing to a descendant of his, who was Jesus, that will build this eternal kingdom, and by a man of rest and a man of without bloodshed on his hands. So, but why Solomon? Okay, 1 Chronicles 22:9, it says, "Behold, a son will be born to you, who shall be a man of rest. I will give him rest from all his enemies on every side, for his name shall be Solomon, and I will give peace and quiet to Israel in his days." Okay. Beautiful verse. And this one actually specifically says his name shall be Solomon. Now, well, we also talked about too how the names in the Bible are not always, they have a spiritual meaning behind it. So just like Jesus was called Emmanuel, but his name was actually Yeshua. Well, that name is an essence. Emmanuel means God with us, and we also need to remember that for this lesson we talk about today. But just like we talk about Solomon, whose name literally means peace. And he says, "I will give peace and quiet to Israel in his days." So, his name shall be peace. We know Jesus is a Prince of Peace. But we aren't going specifically into Solomon today. So why Solomon? Why Solomon? This man of rest that's supposed to build this house of God, right? This man of rest supposed to build this house of God. Now let's go into this chart for our anagogical interpretation to understand some things and some equivalencies. So we see Solomon is the 10th covenant in the flesh, okay? And who is the one that God made a covenant with, who is the builder of his house, Solomon. Now we also see next to him in the 10 generations from Adam to Noah, the 10th generation is Noah. Now, Solomon's name does not mean rest, but guess whose name does mean rest? Noah. Noah's name means rest. And now we'll also see some equivalencies. There's a lot of equivalencies between Noah and Solomon. These two have both they did actually build the greatest structures in this Bible, in the story of God, which literally says in the definition of his word, son of Lamech, father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, builder of the ark, which saved his family from the destruction of the world, which God the destruction of the world which God sent on the world by the flood. Okay. These two are both builders, and we're going to get into in a second also how Solomon was even a bit. Well, they're both big because these are spiritual stories. And I'll read this for you really quickly. But we have Noah by faith, Hebrews 11:7. By faith, Noah being warned by God about things not yet seen, in reverence prepared an ark for the salvation of his household, by which he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness which is according to faith. Now, understand something. Understand this. Noah built an ark for the salvation of his household. What was the purpose? The purpose of this temple that Solomon was building. The purpose of this temple that Solomon was building was a place that was a refuge from the world, where God could dwell within and people can have encounters with God. It was a place that was made for the salvation of the people of Israel. Noah and Solomon are very alike. Now, there are also some differences in their temples, the temples they built, and I call the Ark a temple because it was a place of refuge. There are some differences. Where we have Noah, and this also has some very great spiritual revelation in it. If you know that the flood is a parable for baptism. Noah brought in two of every kind of animal. Now we know that the serpent in the Garden of Eden was the devil. He brought in two of every kind of animal, and we understand that animals are parables for angels and demons, spirits and unclean spirits. You've had lessons on this before in the past. I don't expect to have to go back to those things and talk about them specifically. But we understand that those things are parables for angelic beings or spiritual beings, unclean spirits, demons, angels, clean spirits, animals. Noah brought all the unclean animals, and he also brought all the clean animals into the ark through that baptism. Which is why, even after baptism, we still need a purification of heart, because the reality is, two of every animal and seven of every clean animal is still within you. Now we'll notice in the temple that Solomon created, only clean animals will be even near this temple. There are no unclean animals in this temple. Now, that's also why there was such a huge devastation when it came to what happened with the Maccabees and what the Gentiles did, sacrificing pigs in their temple and things of that nature, which is a whole nother prophecy according to the will of God and the body of Christ and things that would happen. But we have to understand, at root, no unclean animals were ever destined or ever meant to or ever told to go into this temple. But in the ark with Noah, he took clean and unclean animals. Now, I want to go into this because we understand what the true temple is. The true temple. So when we're talking about this, we are not talking about physical buildings. The true temple. The true temple. And I'll read this and then we'll talk a little bit more. We're going to start in John 2, going from John 2, verse 13, all the way down to verse 22. So enjoy the ride. Here we go. The Passover of the Jews was near, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. He found the temple, those who were selling oxen and sheep and doves, and the money changers seated at their tables. And he made a scourge of cords and drove them all out of the temple with the sheep and the oxen, and he poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. And to those who were selling the doves, he said, "Take these things away. Stop making my father's house a place of business." His disciples remembered that it was written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." The Jews then said to him, "What sign do you show us as your authority for doing these things?" Jesus answered them, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." The Jews then said, "It took 46 years to build this temple, and you will raise it up in 3 days?" But he was speaking of the temple of his body. So when he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he said this, and they believed the scriptures and the word which Jesus had spoken. So in this story, Jesus is speaking in truth that his body is the temple. Now we have to understand something about what Solomon really did. And we're going to have to zoom out just a little bit, or actually we don't have to zoom out too much, but we're going to understand something. This temple that Solomon was building, and we actually see very clearly that David gave provisions to Solomon to build this temple, and we're talking about those provisions in a little bit, the things that he gave. David gave 9 different things. Okay, he gave 9 different things. He gave gold, he gave silver, he gave brass, he gave wood, he gave iron, he gave precious stones, onyx stones. He gave what's another one he gave? Let's see, we got here. He gave stones of antimony, and he gave alabaster. Okay, he gave all these things to Solomon to build this house. What we have to understand is that this house is something that started with Adam. Now, I think this is also an interesting thing to think about, because not only is it something that is true in this word of God and just a biological truth of life, something for you to also think about your family and your life, and what are you building? What are you building? But you have to understand, if you look at these covenants in the flesh, these people that God made covenants with, which are all in one family. This is one family that leads to this covenant, this new covenant in Christ, that leads to the birth of Christ. There's a reason why they call Jesus the son of David, who was also the son of Solomon. But all these people were necessary to bring about Jesus. These people have been building the temple of the flesh of Jesus since Adam. Adam's life was necessary. And although Jesus comes through Seth, Cain's life was necessary. What he did to Abel and his influence was necessary for Seth to come about. Noah's life was necessary in the things he did to move forward. Abraham's life was necessary, things he did to move forward. Isaac, Jacob, the sons of Israel, the Levites, David, Solomon. These people have been preparing a structure, and Solomon was the last builder to bring about the flesh of Jesus Christ, who is God with us, which is a reflection of the Feast of Tabernacles, that he built the tabernacle that we are to dwell in today. Do you understand that? And that's why I challenge you to also think about, yes, this is a great spiritual truth to understand about this Bible and these people and this story of something being built. There's something being built. You're watching a pregnancy from Adam all the way to Jesus' birth. You were watching a pregnancy and a development in the womb of this flesh of Jesus Christ, that all these people had to happen, these stories had to happen, the things they went through for his flesh to be encoded in the way that it's encoded, and feel the way that it feels, and be built up to look the way it looks, to all these there's many different things about his flesh. That it had to go through these experiences through these people to come about. In the same way, you are a product of generations and generations and generations of decisions and marriages and traumas and blessings and many different things that come about that make you the way you are, that make you walk the way you walk, that make you have the how do I say this, the structure of flesh that you have. You just don't understand that the problems you have didn't start with you. It's funny because even as I think about this right now, I think about the ways they judged Jesus in the flesh. I mean, they were calling him a drunkard. And I think back to Noah, who got done with off his ark, and immediately he drinks some wine and he gets drunk. But we will see very clearly the wisdom the wisdom of Solomon that is in Jesus, and we see the man after God's heart that is in David. We see the dedication to the service of God that's in the Levites. We see the I'll say this, the commitment to holiness that's in the sons of Israel, and so on and so forth, all the way down the line. But all these things, all these people had to happen for him to be completely who he is. He is the full embodiment of all these covenants. He's all of them. John 15, 1-4, let's go here. And so he says, and we're going to actually go all the way down to verse 11. So let's take this ride together. I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that bears fruit, he prunes it so that it may bear more fruit. You are already clean because of the word which I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you, as the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine. So neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, and you are the branches. He who abides in me, and I in him, he bears much fruit, for apart from me you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away as a branch and dries up, and they gather them and cast them into the fire, and they are burned. If you abide in me, and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit, and so prove to be my disciples. Just as the Father has loved me, I have also loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you, so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be made full. So once again, he is talking about this abiding in him. Understand this abiding in him. It's like walking into a temple. But when we obey his words, it is as if you are walking into the temple of God and you are abiding in him. You are inside that temple. As long as we keep and stay in that word, we abide in his temple. We abide in the temple of God. Which is why we come to understand, and some people don't understand it, and it's a sad thing to see. A lot of people don't understand it, and they still have the conviction of physical building, gathering, temple worship. But we have this reenactment, I believe, through Jehoshaphat. I know Hezekiah also had a great reformation in his time, and but he was a great reformation back into temple worship. These kings in the Old Testament, which was a very great feat, was for him to reenact or reestablish temple worship. But we understand that that's what we are doing as disciples of Christ. We are reestablishing temple, not even reestablishing, we are introducing true temple worship to many people. And I'm going to read this next passage before I get into that fully. John 4, we go from 19 to 24. The woman said to him, Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshiped in this mountain, and you people say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship. Jesus said to her, Woman, believe me, an hour is coming when neither in this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know. For salvation is from the Jews. But an hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For such people the Father seeks to be his worshipers. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth. Now we read this, and I'm sure that this has been read several times, not only in Kingdom School, it's come across your plate. And we read it, and for some reason, the carnal residue in our minds hears this and cannot accept the fact that God does not desire worship in a specific physical place. It says the true worship will worship the Father in spirit and truth. And so once again, when we truly come into this temple, we abide in him through his word, we are worshiping in spirit and truth. As he said, his word is truth. He is the truth, the way, and the life. So when we abide in his word, which is a spiritual worship, a spiritual service, It's as if we are coming to church. And some of us live in church 24/7. Some of us visit every once in a while. But that's how also your physical visitation to church does not truly reflect your church attendance record. Because there are people who show to a physical church every Sunday or Saturday, but their attendance in Emmanuel, who is God with us, is at 0%. It says 0%. So once again, just come understand the temple, the true temple of God is Christ. That is the truth. It is Christ. And even when we go into the New Testament and we look further and deeper and understand that, this heavenly Jerusalem is being built and the foundation stones are the disciples, it says that we are his body. So we are still Christ. When you are coming into that temple, although it is made of people, by his word, you abide in that temple, that heavenly Jerusalem, which is a city in a sense. But we have to understand that it is through our obedience and our abiding in his word that we come into that temple, that we come into that true worship. We come into the temple that Solomon built. Let's talk about this temple, okay? So we have all these building materials. We're talking about these building materials. We have cedar wood from Lebanon. We have cypress wood. I have all the verses next to it if you want to go back and reference those. Pine wood, juniper wood, olive wood, a lot of wood, obviously. Gold, okay? We have the bronze or brass. We have iron. We have silver. We have precious stones. We have stone. We have fine linen. Now, these are the building materials. These are things that were actually used to build the temple. Now, I want to talk about these things that were used to build the temple for a second. We're going to look at this because, once again, we're trying to get spiritual revelation about this temple of God. It's awesome to come to understand Jesus, Yeshua, who he is. He is this temple. He is this temple. Let's see if I can do something fancy and put this side to side. Give me one second. Let's see what I can do here. Not that. Okay, I'm not that fancy yet, but I'll figure it out sooner or later. So putting these things, we're gonna go back and forth and we'll look at it, okay? So we see, obviously, one of the things we saw over and over again was wood, right? Now we look at David's gifts to Yahweh's house. He gave us 9 things. Now these are also in accordance to a lot of other 9 things. There's 9 Jubilee creations. If you know what the Jubilee is by now, it is the day in which he created the heaven and earth again. Okay, it says in the day in Genesis 2, that's pointing to the Jubilee. There's 9 creations: earth, heaven, man, the garden, trees pleasing to the sight and for food, tree of life, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, living creatures, and the woman. Okay, now we have 9 being chosen. The rest are sojourner or Gentiles, cattle, the donkey, ox, female servant, male servant, daughter, son, and yourself. Okay. There's 9 children of Jesse. So David's dad. There's Eliab, Adinadab, Shemaiah, Nathanael, Radai, Ozam, David, Zeruiah, and Abigail. And then we have these 9 gifts to Yahweh's house, which I've already mentioned. We have 9 beatitudes: the poor in spirit, the mourning, the gentle, the hungry thirst for righteousness, the merciful, the pure in heart, the peacemakers, the persecuted for the sake of righteousness, persecuted because of Yeshua. Then we have the gifts of the Spirit. We have the word of wisdom, the word of knowledge, the faith, the healing, the miracles, the prophecy, the distinguishing of spirits, various kinds of tongues, interpretation of tongues. We have 9 fruits of the Spirit: the self-control, gentleness, faithfulness, goodness, kindness, patience, peace, joy, and love. We have 9 voices of the Spirit, which are in Revelation: the harpists, the musicians, the flute players, the trumpeters, the craftsmen, the meal, the light, the lamp, the bridegroom, and the bride. Okay? Now, when we are reading about these building materials, and we're also going to talk about the temple furnishing, so the things that were actually inside of the temple that made the temple nicer or filled the place, there's a difference. When we learn about the building materials, we are reading about foundational things that are without. Everyone who comes into this temple experiences these things. These are not extras. These are things that you are guaranteed to experience. So when we see wood, we look at it and we see the equivalencies, okay? So we see that the foundation, the building is made of trees pleasing to the sight and for food. Is also equivalent to mercy. So being merciful, they experience mercy. It's built on with miracles. It's built with kindness. And I kind of want to just harp on the fruits of the Spirit for now, and you guys can dive deeper into the other aspects. I don't want to be on here for an hour today. I want to just focus on just the fruits of the Spirit that are the foundational pieces of the temple, or the temple who is Christ that we come into. Kindness. And I'll go B2 to the kindness and mercy. Okay. The next thing that we see is gold. Okay. We see gold. And we see gold, which is the first one, which is equivalent to self-control and the poor in spirit. These are things that everybody who comes in here, that they witness about Christ. These are the non-negotiables that you, if you are truly entering and you're seeing the right temple, you're entering the right temple. These are the things you're entering. You're entering into kindness. You're entering into this place of self-control. You're entering this place of poorness in spirit. You're entering into this place of mercifulness. Next one we see is bronze or brass. And we see that bronze is the third one. So this next thing that we see, that this temple of God, this Christ that we come into is made of, is gentleness and faithfulness. We can't miss it. Gentleness and faithfulness. Iron, okay? Next thing we see is iron. And it's interesting that all these things that we see in the foundation are within the first five things that David gives. These are foundational things. These are not additives that make things more beautiful, or like couches and teeth. No, these are like there is no temple, there is no structure without these things. So next thing we saw was iron. We see the equivalencies. The iron, the equivalency of iron is a hunger and thirst for righteousness and goodness. These are not things that you are not seeing the true temple of God, or these are not qualities that you see in this place that God's trying to bring you to. The non-negotiables of being in Christ. These are the non-negotiables. Everything else, you might get it, you might not get it, you might experience it, you might not experience it, because maybe you didn't come into that part of the temple. But this is the building. You can't miss it. Silver. The second one, we see the equivalencies, and we see gentleness again, the fruits of the Spirit, and we see mourning. We see it's built off this godly grief, which we know that it literally says about Christ is that he is the mourning servant. He is a servant of grief, is a man of grief. But these are things that you can't miss. The hardships of who he is, and what he's experienced, and the mourning that he experienced, the pain that he experienced. You can't miss it, that this is the foundation of this building. Precious stones, stone, fine linen. Now, it doesn't give the exact types of stones, so we're going to look at all stones, okay? We got precious stones, and we have really 3 different levels of stones right there. We have onyx, okay? We have stones of antimony, we have the precious stones. These are equivalent to patience, peace, and joy. Purity of heart, peacemakers, and being persecuted for the sake of righteousness. These are things that you cannot miss. These are part of the foundational building, which really engulfs almost all of the other fruits of the Spirit here. And actually, I apologize because this is an older chart version that 9 at the bottom is it should be red. So excuse that. I apologize for that. But we have to understand and see the equivalencies, understand these are the things that are the non-negotiables, are the foundation. These are the foundations. These are the foundations of this building materials of Christ and who he is. Like these fruits of the Spirit. That's why knowing the fruits of the Spirit is probably one of the best things you can do to truly identify what is Christ and what is not Christ. There's a reason that these fruits of the Spirit and these building materials are synonymous spiritually, because it's trying to tell you that we build a house of fruit. My house, my temple, the thing I'm actually coming to is a place of fruit, of my fruit, this fruit of the Spirit. The only thing that we don't see is alabaster, which is the last one, which I do believe is because that 8th day is not a day that has been offered per se yet at this time. When it came to Solomon, we do see the only person we see actually bringing alabaster to Christ is the woman who bought the alabaster vial with the perfume in it and washed it and put it on his feet. Now, I thought that was interesting. I thought that was very interesting, and there's a reason why he said that wherever this gospel is preached, this woman will this story be told about this woman. It's as if she brought the last. She brought the last provision, the last product, the last material that was needed in his temple. Now I'll move on, and we don't have to keep going back and forth too much, but we see a lot of things with the furnishings. You know, the bronze altar, the bronze seat, the bronze lavers, the gold, the lampstands, gold tables with the showbread, gold bowls, dishes, and utensils, gold incense altar. We see the gold cherubim, the bronze pillars, the gold chains, pomegranate decorations. That is a nod of the seven produces, and those produce is actually spiritually equivalent to understanding and godliness. The bronze and gold doors, purple, blue, and crimson yarn, which are those colors are associated with the 7th day, the 6th day, and the 1st or 8th day. And then crimson fabric is also associated with the 1st or the 8th day. And so that's lesson 106. Just wanted you to think a little bit deeper about the temple and understand how it carries much spiritual revelation into what it means to come into Christ, who is the true temple in which we worship in spirit and truth, and how everything that Solomon used, if you really understand the spiritual revelation behind it, are the things that we should expect to come into when it comes to the temple of Christ, and also experience in the temple of Christ. And so, love you all. Everyone be well. It's lesson 106. We'll be back on 107 very soon.